So, hello and welcome to Intuitive Connection. I'm your host, intuitive counselor, and spiritual guide Victoria Shaw. And today I want to talk about our namesake topic. I'm going to talk about our intuition. And I'm going to talk about the fact that you are already intuitive. You are already intuitive. No matter who's listening to this right now, it is me promising you that you already got it, that it's already there, that it is your birthright. And though I know so many people are drawn to this show and shows like it and my other teachings and all the things that I do, I've actually been teaching intuition development now probably for about 14, 15 years. So I'm in it deep. And yet, the thing that I know is that each and every one of us, being a soul, having a human experience, we are all already naturally intuitive. And I often joke when I teach classes. I often joke in the little intro, I'll say, I've got the easiest job in the world because I am teaching you to do something that you already know how to do, that you have been doing since you were born, right? Since you were like right out of your mommy's belly, right? I'm teaching you to do that, and you already are doing it. So, how easy is that? And of course, we know that making that commitment to really tune in and trust our intuition, it doesn't always feel that easy, right? But the truth of the matter is, right? You were born doing this. You know how to do it. To some degree, you're already doing it because you are already intuitive. And the trick to awakening your intuition is not so much to learn to do something that you haven't done before, like, you learn to swim or you learn to ride a bike or you learn algebra, right? Those are all things probably your soul your soul has already experienced that through the collective too, but and that's a story for another day. Um, but all of those things, right, are things that you may have to learn to do. Whereas your intuition, you were born doing it. You were born doing it, right? And everyone is intuitive. So you may say, look, Victoria, I've seen you on the show. I've seen you give readings, or maybe you've seen the television show Living in Alignment, or you've had a session with me. And, I don't know that I can do what you do, right? Or you've seen other professional psychics or mediums, right? And, or people that are telepathic or using all these psi abilities, and you're like, I don't think I'm there yet. Like, I want more of what those folks got. And yes, right, that nonlinear knowing, psychic mediumship kind of abilities are things that can be developed. They're things that can be learned. And just like everything else, right? Everybody can learn to swim, but not everyone's going to be Michael Phelps, right? And so for some of us, it does come easier to expand this natural capability called your intuition into other things than it might be for others. But that does not mean that I have a special gift that you don't have, right? Because I said it before, I'm going to say it again, and you're probably going to hear it many a times through this episode. You are already intuitive and you are already using your intuition. And so oftentimes one of the very first steps that I teach when I teach intuition development is I tell people the first thing you got to do is notice where it's already happening for you. Start to just tune in to where your intuition is already flowing, right? Notice, maybe journal or pay attention to all of those times that you knew something, right? And you didn't know how you knew it. It wasn't from here. It wasn't something you were told or something you were taught or something that you discovered logically or empirically, right? It was just something that you knew. And you didn't know how you knew it, and you followed it, and it was right, right? Maybe it was a gut feeling or just a deep sense of knowing or a calm voice in your head or a dream that you had. Maybe it was something that came out of somebody else's lips and you heard it and you're like, oh my God, that's it. That's true. Aha, right? All of those things are your intuition at work. Anywhere that you're really in the flow, anything that comes naturally to you, anything that people are like, wow, like, how did you do that? Most likely too. Those things are also intuitively guided. Those are the areas where you're connecting with your soul source wisdom. And we're all doing it all the time. It's just that we have learned to call it something else, right? Or we've learned, the mind has learned to take credit for it because at some point in time, and you might have heard me say this before, um, you came to an important caretaker or an adult or person in your world when you were really little and you knew something and you didn't, you couldn't explain how you knew it, but you knew. And you went and you shared that information and they said to you, you can't know that. That's not true. How do you know that? And you shut it down, right? You learned it wasn't safe. You learned it wasn't the way you were allowed to know things. And so your mind and more ordinary ways of knowing started to take credit. It's funny. I've had two people on the show over the years, both psychics, who both told me something that didn't necessarily ring true for me, but in retrospect, maybe it did just a little bit. But they both told me that though they shut down their intuition to a great degree in their childhood, the one area where it still shined, where they still let their intuition, work was in school. There's one area, so they shut down their intuition, but there was one area they said where it still shined, and that was knowing the answers to the tests. All right. I've had two people tell me this. And one of them said specifically, I think the reason I left that one open was because I could give myself an excuse. Well, I must have heard it somewhere. I must have known it from something else, right? I must just be really smart. But they always knew without studying the answers on all the tests. That was their intuition at work, right? And but because they could come up with another reason for why they knew it, right? They weren't so afraid to share, right? But a lot of times we have learned to call our intuition something else, right? Or we haven't even been thinking about intuition anymore because a long time ago we shut that down. That doesn't mean it's not working or flowing. It just means a lot of times we're not giving it credit, right? We're coming up with an excuse why our mind came up with that, right? Or we're having a aha moment or a hit, and then we come back and go, oh, well, I know why I thought of that. So I'm thinking about an example that happened not so long for me. And, I kind of go the other way, friends. I tend to think everything's my intuition, because I just flow with that so much. So I always think of my mind as just helping my intuition, spirit, soul out. But it's all coming directly from source, right? Especially if it feels good, especially if it's in the flow, especially if it doesn't feel like that heavy overthinking thing that never gets the job done anyway. I trust and know that that's my intuition and that's my gold. And so, I try to flow with that more and more. And I would say that is probably true of you too. But anyway, I was looking for my sunglasses and they weren't in any of the regular places. And so I did what I often do when I can't find something, I just let it go. Because I have learned that if I just let it go, at some point, usually not so long, I will get a flash or a bit of knowing that will tell me where it is. And that's what happened. I was sitting on my back porch wearing a different pair of sunglasses because, I live in Southern California. So I have a few, but my favorites were missing. And I had a sudden flash of where they were. And then my mind quickly filled in the details. My mind reminded me that oftentimes when I go on my bike, I take off my regular sunglasses that I'm wearing and I put on another pair of sunglasses that are good for biking. And they have this little dorky mirror on them. It's like a little rear view mirror that my neighbor gave me, and I love it. I love it so much. So it hooks to the sunglasses, and I can see if someone's behind me. So it's just a little fun little safety hack, and it doesn't fit on my regular sunglasses, but it does fit on my biking sunglasses. So I usually switch over when I hop on my bike, which is why my sunglasses were sitting next to my bike in the garage, right? But it wasn't going through my mind that I thought of it. It came to me intuitively in a flash, and then my mind filled in the blanks, right? And I recognize that. And I noticed that because I've been doing this work now for, 16 years and teaching intuition development for about 14 of those. And so, I know how this works. I know how it feels. I know where my intuition is flowing. But for a lot of us, we don't. We just say, oh, I just remembered where it is. right? And we don't realize that it's our intuitive flash, our intuitive knowing that gets that process going, because oftentimes when we're in the mind and we're trying to figure it out, the mind just creates more noise than it does solutions. Okay. And so when we start to tune in to how our intuition is working, when we start to pay attention to those things, when we start to give credit where credit is due, what'll happen is we will strengthen our relationship with our intuition and our mind will still be there. I love having a mind, as I always say, but our mind will start to take its natural and more appropriate role, which is as a meaning maker, explicator, translator of your intuition, which is a very, very different and much more helpful thing that keeps us out of fear based overthinking, right? So it's really, really good, right? And then your intuition will begin to flow and you'll start to see what your special way or your special sauce is. Now, I just want to hit the other question because, like I said, you're already intuitive. And for many of you, too, that intuition is flowing really, really free and really, really loud. And it could even be a little bit like it was for me, where for many years my intuition was so on fire and I was picking up so many signals all of the time that it was actually hard for me to hear like the good stuff and to discern. And I think a lot of people that might carry the diagnosis like ADHD or anxiety, right? Anxiety can be from a lot of different things, and so can ADHD. But for me, I believe that ADHD diagnosis that I carried through well, not most of my childhood, but I was diagnosed late, but it was definitely there. Um, came from the fact that I had all of my intuitive channels turned up so high that a lot of times I couldn't hear anything else. I just was very ungrounded. I couldn't tune in to the 3D, everyone else frequency because all the other, channels were playing at the same time. And so it was just too much. And on my journey to intuition development, and I've shared this before, but a lot of what I did, it wasn't so much about tuning up the dial on my intuition, which sometimes we do need to do to listen to it more. It was about using more discernment and starting to eliminate some of the junk channels that I was tuning into, like a lot of my overactive empathy and a lot of that kind of noise so that I could learn to tune in and hone into that which was important to me and learn to use discernment and focus in on what I wanted to focus in on rather than being overwhelmed by all of the noise and all of the frequencies and channels blasting at once. So that was a big piece of my journey. Which brings me to the last thing I want to share in this episode because I talked about this, right? So it is true. You are intuitive. We are all intuitive and we can all get better at this. Okay. And we all already have our special sauce in the way that our intuition is working for us. And I truly believe when you start to tune into that, and you start to notice where it's already flowing and find your own unique intuitive gifts, that's when the party really gets started because that is the unique way in which your soul wants to express, itself through your human you. And that's what we're here to do. So yay for you to tuning into that. And of course, once we start to see how it's naturally flowing for us, I have found in my own experience that it tends to grow, right? So for me, I've shared that my first intuition development class was very visually oriented and it was all turn down your second chakra, don't have feelings, like just see it, see it, see it. And visual knowing was just not my thing. It wasn't accessible for me. I could feel kinesthetically, I could hear things and I could know things, but seeing was the last of my clairs, right? My psychic senses to come online. And it's still not my strongest one, though it's there now for sure. And what I learned from that class was, focus on what was already working for you. Don't try to do what somebody else thinks is the right thing. And it was a really powerful message. And they were often telling me, don't feel, don't feel, don't feel, because they were saying like, you're an out of control empath and you're feeling everyone else's feelings and that's shutting you down. And even saying that makes my energy a little uncomfortable. And to some degree, that was not untrue. To some degree, I was definitely a feeler. Um, But the kinesthetic sense that I can sense energy and feel like I can feel the difference between my intuition and everything else. I can feel the movement of energy. I can work on other people's physical bodies with my hands without touching them. They don't have to even be in the same zip code, right? I just feel energy, right? Those are all part and parcel of my unique intuitive gifts. And if I had just focused on building that psychic visual sense, right, it would have been a very frustrating journey. So I always invite you to start what's flowing for you, and you'll be surprised where it takes you. And that's how it's been for me. But I also want to hit the fact that for some of us, those psychic senses don't really shut down, right? As much as for others. And for some people, they're just really loud and just really strong. And so a lot of, the really famous psychics that you hear about, or us professionals, right? Where people for whom it didn't shut down, or for some people, they have maybe a brain injury or a near death experience and it pops back up. And so I want to talk a little bit about that, about the people like myself that have those profound senses that don't really shut down. Because I know, like when I was a child, I always knew things about people. I could always read people in a way that was well beyond my age, right? I know in high school that I wrote a bunch of papers that I was praised for. And everyone thought I was really smart. And now I realize I was just channeling, now that I know what it was called and I know what it feels like. I was like, oh, I was just channeling, or I was just reading the energy of that author that I was writing the paper about, right? And all of that good stuff, or checking in with the Akashic records, right? So I've been doing this stuff my whole life, and it's always been my special sauce, and it's always what's come naturally to me. And I think one of the reasons for that is I think for some of us, and I can only speak for myself, but there's some ongoing research about this. I think for some of us, the brain is just set up differently, and it can be from experiences we've had. A lot of empaths develop that ability, because they grow up in dysfunctional environments and they're learning to get a read on their family members or their siblings or whatever the perceived threat is, or the emotional person that they're trying to caretake in order to keep peace in the family. Taking a breath, because talking about that, it lowers my vibe a little bit, but it is a thing. And I love you guys. If you are recognizing that that's your story, it is absolutely something that you can work with. And you're a beautiful, beautiful soul. And I love you. Um, and sometimes too, we know that people that are not neurotypical, like people on the autistic spectrum, or myself, people with ADHD or learning differences, both the things that I had, right? I believe those atypicalities made it hard for me to fully anchor into my left brain and really tune into things in that linear, logical way. And because I was so motivated to be smart and to do other things, right? It kept my psychic senses alive, and I used those instead. Okay. And so it is the case that I believe that some of us, for all sorts of reasons, may be wired to keep this stuff more open than other people. But I will tell you, what we focus on grows. Intention is really important. And the guides say energetically now, so just the energy and everything is so open that for many of us, there is a beautiful portal, a conduit, or channel or energy wave opening up for so many more people to really, tap in and expand their psychic senses. Okay, so we can all do it. And for some of you, it might look really big and loud like it does for me. And if you feel called to develop it in that way, you go, keep listening to the show, take a class with me, take a class with someone else, set that intention and let her rip. And for others, it might still be just that beautiful, subtle voice, that deep knowing, the signs, the synchronicities, the aha moments, the areas where you're in the flow, the knowing that you don't know how you know. And that is beautiful too. That is so beautiful. But the place I want to leave this, my friends, is that we all have this. We are all intuitive. And as soon as we recognize that and we let go of the qualifications or the conditions or the idea of how this has to look, and we start to trust our own divine intuitive connection, you will find that that voice will get louder and stronger. And it will start to be for you, as it is for me, the guiding force in your life, which is, in my estimation, the best, the most joyous, and the most magical way to live and to thrive. All right, I think that's it. I think that's the episode. I think we're good here. I hope that you guys loved that one as much as I loved sharing it. I hope that you like the new microphone. Let me know how it sounds. I'm going to be listening to this one and deciding if I have to tweak again. Um, and um, and keep tuning into the show, share, like, subscribe, do the stuff. You can check out my website because I do a lot of offerings and classes and retreats. And I have a membership community all focused on guiding you to live your best and brightest life by connecting with your intuition. And whatever you do, keep listening to the show, keep enjoying it along with me. I love each and every one of you for reals. So grateful to be able to share in this journey with you. And enjoy the rest of your day, and namaste.